I'm going to introduce some the new generation of the Metroparks family. I'll talk about cool stuff, and we have questions, so good luck. It's a tough crowd. This is a tough crowd. So welcome to TNA.
Behind you.
Making sure that everyone's. Thanks so much, everyone, for having us here. As she mentioned, my name is Zuri Carter. You might see my name on a card. It says Zuri Jane. That's my government name. If you say it, I'm in trouble. So please don't say it. Really excited to be here. I'm originally from South Carolina. We moved up here directly from North Carolina, however. I have spent some time in Michigan, and East Lansing in particular, some time down in Cincinnati as well as Pennsylvania. So I'm not unfamiliar with being in the North, but it's not quite in my bones right now when it comes to the cold. But I did my undergrad, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, at Clemson University in wildlife and fisheries biology. When I eventually moved around the Eastern US for a little bit, I made my way to East Lansing to Michigan State University, where I got a master's in human dimensions with a focus on human dimensions of wildlife management. A lot more moving. I'm done moving. I'm here in Toledo. I'm glad to be here. We visited in March of 22, moved up here in September of 22. Haven't been here long, but really loving the city. Everything is 15 to 20 minutes away. So I really like that, especially when just to get to a Walmart when we were younger, we had to drive 30 minutes anyways. It's not very far for me. It's about 5 or 6 songs. Tonight, the portion that I'll be speaking to you about is we're in Secor, and then I'll be speaking to you also about the Audubon Islands project that I'm working on. I don't know if Tim Schetter is on, but he is sweet. He'll be able to chime in, especially if there are additional questions, because I wasn't here for the full entirety of the Secor Metropark project, and he has that history, he has that knowledge. I know a lot of money went into this, and you can start seeing some of those numbers right now with just the acquisition for Secor Metropark. It was, as many of you know, formerly a golf course. How many of you had a chance to visit or play at that golf course before? A fair number of people. I don't know if folks in Zoom world land are raising your hands or you visited, but that's great. Like you know what it used to look like before. When I visited in March of 22, I got to see a lot of the earthwork that had happened, but definitely no context for what it looked like before we started doing some restoration efforts. This land was purchased from the Western Reserve Land Conservancy in 2017. It makes Secor now 867 acres, the third largest metropark. Largest metropark is openings. Yes. And some of the funding that went into that was the WRSP, and I never get this acronym right, but it is a significant funding resource for Ohio. And then the USP EPA Mommy AOC program, there's the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that also contributed funding towards this project. The main objectives for the Secor Metropark expansion, as some of you got a chance to see today when we took the hike, was habitat restoration. You see a lot of reforestation, the tubes, even when you're driving on Central Avenue, water quality improvement. For those who were out there, I hope you got deep in that mud as we were walking through, but it held a lot of water. And then with the stormwater retention. More funding, because when you start doing earthwork and restoration, that's what you need. You need funding and resources to make it happen. Additional grants Tim, I believe it was a total of 8 different grants. And the only thing I hear from my grant coordinator is please don't do this again. But it was an exciting thing to pull together all these different funding agencies and utilizing funding and matching to the absolute max. And that's what Tim did. He brought it together along with help from other Metroparks staff at the time. You'll see funding from the Metroparks Toledo Foundation, Ohio EPA, and the U.S. Forest Service. And for the Forest Service, they definitely contributed to a lot of the trees that you, tubes that you see out there in the trees. High in the sky view of the planned work that was done out there. And if ever you want to see these colors where it's not kind of doled out, post online, you should probably see it a little bit better, but the different colors representing reforestation efforts. Best view being what's along the road, definitely not within a reforestation area. Music prairie, upland prairie and savanna, sedge meadow, and wet prairie. The green, the sedge meadow might be hard to see, and I don't want to get too far off screen. That's over to the east side of the photo. Actually, before I go to the next slide, forgive me, y'all. I'm going to go off screen just a little bit so I can point for everyone. But if you look on the shared screen where you see the black hash marks for the legend that represents new forested floodplain, and that's along here, along that prairie ditch area. That's where we took the ditch that for those of you who visit the golf course, you may recall what it looked like. It was a straight up ditch, but we expanded it. And the photos that you'll see coming up really show how that expansion works. If you remember from Sunday Comics, because I haven't bought a newspaper in quite some time, I used to enjoy the Sunday Comics a lot. There's always that little one where it says, like, compare the difference between the two pictures. We're going to be doing just a little bit of that coming up. This is, let me see how to explain it. For the folks that just walked with us, this is that first water area that was off to the left that we passed by. But when we were coming into the Secor Metropark expansion from the back part of the expansion, and you're walking around, this is an example of one of those, what's the correct word for the golf course? Water holes that was taken and expanded. We weren't trying to make it deeper. We're just regrading so the water comes out a little bit more and reflects more of like the wetland, where you have that gradual transition from like really shallow water to a slightly a little bit deeper to accommodate different species needs. And you can see all the rest of a lot of water hangs out around here, and oh, deep. I can't point online, but it was exciting because I think we're about right in here when we saw like the beaver dam and some beaver activity that was happening. And beavers are the cutest things. Not cuter than possums though. They're not cuter than possums. All right, so the picture that you see right now is of a prairie ditch, kind of what it looked like from not quite the beginning, because as you know, it was a golf course. All that turf was removed, but as you see the changes, so what to look for is that the expansion, that regrading where it starts to be able to hold more water on the landscape. And you'll get a better idea of what it was that we were going for, holding that water on the landscape. After the earthwork has started on the property, this is down here at the bottom. For folks in the back, you may not be able to see as well. There's a date on the bottom of the photo to show the time frame for when this work was occurring. So this one was in June 2022. By June 16th of 2022, this is what it looked like. A lot of things are happening quickly. Like if you blink, a lot more stuff might happen. We jumped a good bit of time on here. This is now February 11th, 2023. But the difference between these photos, I'll go back just to make sure that folks are following. Like you don't see the grade changes quite yet. But now you see the more sinuous, I should say, path that we want water to hold, places we want water to be held. And then in February 23, you can kind of see it's working the way that we want it to. This was just over a year ago. Gotta always remember what date it is. Let my watch tell me. This is the ditch working the way we want it to. Along the ditch, there are, what was it, weirs? I think was the right term, where it's holding, we want the water to be held, so it's meant to stop the water on and keep it on the property so that it just expands out. And we have those every so often along the along Prairie Ditch. And this is more recent, October 2023, when things are growing in. As many of you had the opportunity to see today, 6 sandhill cranes were out there. They're coming through. Other wildlife species have been sighted. I think you said a solar have been seen. All these amazing things. Howard Marsh and Secor Metropark expansion are perfect examples of if you build it, they will come. And I've loved especially to be able to see the transition that has happened from when I first visited in March of 23 to where it is now. And that was all I wanted to talk about with the Secor Metropark expansion. Knowing that Tim is online, I want a chance for folks to have ask questions right now. That way it's fresh in your mind and you don't have to hold it through my next presentation. And then there'll be a lot of questions. Yes, Mr. Jerry?
Yeah. Some of it in the funding, you kept mentioning the city of Akron. What does Akron have to do with it?
Yeah. I don't know if I can, let me get back here.
Get back.
It's
It's a lot of money.
a lot of money, and the way that program works, and to if Tim, I don't know if we can get him off of mute or something, but the way that funding works, in my understanding, it's like a loan program. Where actually, let me stop.
I can text with him and see if he can hear you.
Yeah.
So it's a big
I was-
source of funding. Here it's just like, what happens with this?
That's better.
Better.
Oh, that's beautiful. I was trying to find where he is and
Some of those grants sometimes work where you have to have an organization that's. It's like the front end load. And it's distributed from there, so they may be the recipient, the state can then distribute.
and it can't be like we couldn't do it to ourselves. City of Akron borrowed money from the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund.
So what they do is they reduce the loan amount to the city. There's part of it is directed, the other part to restoration projects like this. And they just happen to have a loan with Akron, so the money that the state happen to.
Yeah, he texted me a little bit more detail. It's just,
You're
that's kind of one of these things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, they received the interest rate reduction on their loan, that's sponsoring the project, thereby saving money in the long run and giving us money.
They save money through interest on that interest rate for long.
Funded a lot of projects around the state of Ohio.
Yeah,
We have major multi-million-dollar projects, even like 0.25% reductions in interest rates.
It adds up. and so I knew it was a loan program, but let me let someone else explain it who can explain it clearly. Because I haven't had the opportunity to work on one yet. I'm not sure who was first, so I apologize. Do you want to go first?
I just wondered, what does AOC mean and what
Area
does
of concern.
Yes,
area of concern
yes.
and what is WRRSP?
She said you didn't know that.
It's
Western Reserve.
Western Reserve riparian, it's. I don't know if I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
More to like nakedness.
Yeah.
Actually, that's when.
Wetland Reserve,
Oh, wetlands.
something or other, something that.
Well, then not.
Water Resource Restoration Sponsor
Program. I was like, I hope my phone. For it real quick.
I'm wondering if the work that's being done here will solve flooding problems on the other side of Central Avenue. There's days when, before you were born, that you couldn't drive down Central Avenue because it was flat and flooded. So are we sort of trying to work towards solutions there also?
So there is, we did respond to that.
Okay, sweet, go ahead.
Yeah, it should help, but it will not solve the flooding on Central, and that's what that kind of.
Okay.
We're trying to hold more water on this property here,
Instead of,
but that doesn't really necessarily mean that on the other side it's gonna have much.
because it's flat farmland, so.
Yeah. Should make it work.
Yeah.
Which areas have been seeded already? I mean, in the prairie or the floodplain, or has anything been seeded thus far with seeds from the seed nursery, or is there waiting, or like, what's the status?
The question is, which areas have been seeded already? And if I remember correctly, the wet prairie area has been seeded.
They've pretty much all been seeded.
Okay.
Yeah, they've all gotten a seeding at this point. We might have
And
to
then going
do,
through,
we might have to do a reseeding. Particularly at the sedge meadow, so that's the area in
the
green.
green area.
I think, yeah, a lot of stuff didn't come up, but, you never know. What's gonna be. As the policy.
What about the seed bank? Wouldn't there be seeds in the seed bank before it was farmed or turned into a golf course?
I learned from some of the folks today, it had been a golf course for quite some time. I can't remember, 1928.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah, so it's,
I think they said 100 years or something like that on the seed bank.
Well, the person who might know the answer to that is Jerry Dankowski, because Jerry decided one day to start plowing up at openings to see what would happen. And lo and behold, what, 2 years or something, Jerry? And stuff from 100 years ago started popping up?
Yeah, there is stuff that's sort of. They take it a while, and one time, then it's, fun to see what comes back on its own.
Yeah.
and there's, oh, sorry, I was gonna say, there's still a chance for that to happen here as well. But we're doing our seeding efforts from seed that we have collected at the nursery to also promote regeneration here, or restoration, I should say, not regeneration. Did Tim say something?
The dots are going, but nothing's.
We got a long winded answer coming up.
Yes.
What's the plan for the former clubhouse that's up close to the road?
We've had some issues with the clubhouse. For those who took the walk with us, I don't know if you noticed that some of the windows had been busted with the clubhouse. So there's a possibility that we may end up removing them just because it's being vandalized. I'm hoping that those weren't bird strikes because that's a change. But yeah, that seems to be the route to go right now for those buildings, because the cost of bringing them up to code would be it would be a lot.
Potentially putting a like viewing platform there.
Yes.
Would be. Not set in stone or anything, but that's.
Potentially putting a viewing platform there for those online.
Is it gonna seem like Howard's Marsh? Is it gonna be that much water out there once you get the whole thing to where it's collecting the water? Because Howard's Marsh has a lot.
It has a lot of water. But no, it won't be quite like Howard Marsh. It won't be nearly as much water out there. So definitely do not bring your kayak. We're still looking at whether there are opportunities to build any hiking trails out there, just because we want to see like how the environment is responding over a few years to know where the water is tending to settle before we try to put a trail through and then you can't walk it because you're up to your knees in mud or something.
Just to point out on that point, so that map has all the Ps are plugs.
Oh,
So those are all areas that as part of the rest, we flood channels to try and hold more water, so we changed the hydrology a lot. So it'll take time to figure out exactly how it's all gonna play out.
Yeah. And are there any questions coming through online by chance?
I will say there was an article either yesterday or today in the New York Times that addressed the golf courses back to nature and saying that it was a real interesting article. So I thought, well, we've got two here in, that we've done, so very cool. Very cool. Well, two plus the side foot golf course, so. Got reclaimed naturally without any work, so.
I'm not familiar with, I didn't know about that.
How long did it take?
Marianne was saying that there was a site
yeah,
golf course previously.
So right on River Road and 475,
Yeah, right there, like between Drill Road and.
between them,
Okay, yeah. that's
and
right.
even from Secret's Lake to, yeah, it's just a little tiny, little golf cart. There's still golf balls down there that people are, and that's been longer, I don't know, longer than it.
So near Secret Lake, there used to be a golf course as a part of Side Hook Metropark.
Oh, I don't think so.
One other thing I think Tim did want to mention about this,
And
some of you may have seen it early on, is that we did, after we purchased the golf course, we put it in like soybeans or part of it, soybeans for a while. And so that was kind of like, so they like a bit after. And I think it was pretty, as much of the seeding that's responded. So that was part of that restoration process, not just make some money for a year or something.
Yeah. Exactly. Cool.
And yes, and for those online, if you have questions about Secor, feel free to leave it in the chat as well.
Sure. I'll do the arrows.
My bad.
Should they go double arrows? Finish presentation.
All right, another exciting project that hasn't started, it started for the design and engineering, but it hasn't started for the construction yet, that I have the wonderful opportunity, and when I say wonderful, it is absolutely exciting. Am I excited? Yes. Is the Audubon Island State Nature Preserve. How many of you are familiar with where this is? Many folks, because you're from Toledo.
Well, we're Toledo naturalists, so. I know.
What I look to walk you through today is some of these things, like a brief history about the project, who we're working with on it, the benefits of the project, and how we've gone through the process of getting feedback from the public on it, and a potential timeline for next steps. I will admit, I forgot about updating the potential timeline, but I'll give that to you today. I keep forgetting this is not on the screen here. We've gone through an outreach effort where we held some public open houses at the Mommy Library, where folks were able to come in, hear about what we were thinking for the project, and provide their feedback, which was a great opportunity for me to learn, especially being new here, about the region and the people's experiences with the island. Got to meet the gentleman who used to farm the island, his family used to. And that was like, when you see living history, there's something that really resonates with that. The Audubon Islands, for those who are online who may not know, and those in the room, is located between Maumee and Perrysburg. This is the Conant Bridge. Clearly, I'm not from Toledo. And Audubon Island is that landmass that you see in the river. It's just to the east. As a part of this project, we're working with an extensive project, with an extensive team. Of course, we're the lead. This is funded through the Maumee AOC Area of Concern Program as a part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is with the US EPA. Markings Construction, they helped us out with Howard Marsh, so I know all of you have been there. You're part of TNA. They did an amazing job with that project. They're here with us on this one, along with Verdantis and some of the other subcontractors as well. This is a $3.6 million project that we're working with to do restoration around this island. And it's no small feat at all. A lot of meetings have gone into this over the last year. The aim of this project is to increase river bank stability and habitat diversity. With the Mommy AOC, we're trying to meet some what they call beneficial use impairments. We're trying to address the lack of fish habitat and benthos habitat, because Ohio EPA, and I'll speak to this a little bit later, determined that this stretch of the river isn't quite meeting standards for what would be great habitat for fish and benthos. GLRI stands for Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. There are several projects throughout the region that are happening to address these beneficial use impairments. There, I want to say there's 13 or 14 that are across all the Great Lake Restoration Initiatives. There are 13 or 14 beneficial use impairments. And we've been working to delist each one. One that's coming up, hopefully, with I think one more project to do is delisting the wildlife beneficial use impairment. But this one is focused on aquatic. If you ever want to see, because you're just nerdy like I am, and want to see all the other projects happening in the region, they do have a website, the Mommy AOC, the DMDS. If you type in Mommy AOC DMDS, it'll take you to the website where you can see all the different projects that are happening or have happened in the region and read about those as well. Maps are another thing I really like. When getting into this project, people started just sharing things. And this one is an 1875 map that the city of Maumee shared with us for what the city of Maumee looked like, and of course, how they drew at the time, the Audubon Islands complex. At that time, on this map at least, they call it the Great Island. I'm going to walk you through a history of maps because maps are awesome. In the 1940s, we have an aerial from like when this was being farmed, and it was farmed for quite a while, even into the 1800s. So think of that as you listen about, hear or learn about Audubon Island. It's been farmed for a long time. And before then, historically, it does have Native American history tied to it as well. But just knowing that even though there's a Native American history to this island, it has been farmed for quite some time. This is a 1969 map. That was the first image that you saw. Again, that the extensive farming that was happening on the island. And this is most recently 2023. And this random pinpoint that's on the southwest part of the island is actually us marking to make sure that it's known that there is a bald eagle nest on the island that we have to be mindful of, that we are mindful of as we're planning out this project, because there are federal guidelines that we have to adhere to. And like, as you know, my background is wildlife. I want to make sure that we're taking care of these particular residents. If you're on the Perrysburg side, folks from there, they have their scopes right on the eagle's nest, seeing how they're doing almost on a daily basis. One of the boat club members told me. And the other point is not an eagle's nest or anything. I forget why that point was there.
Where the eagle nest sitter watches liveries, livery watcher sitter.
Okay.
So that's not Orleans.
That would be
Park?
Orleans Park.
Yeah,
Orleans.
there's a darling, oh gosh, no, it's gonna leave my mind. Kingfisher.
Oh, Kingfisher.
Yeah, we're about the Kingfisher, there's two of them.
That hang out
Orleans
on.
Park.
Yeah,
Oh,
you love them.
so exciting. Yes, anything blue.
Didn't forgot to take the slide out, so there's no need to explain the slide. I gotta do more of my due diligence. This is a map depicting the amount of land that's been lost from Audubon Islands. since at least 1963. This was an image that was created by Army Corps of Engineers, and we also created one actually using the 1940s imagery. But this one at least shows over time, each year, how much land has been eroded away. And the picture on the right that shows an example of what it looked like around the island.
Wow.
Our GIS manager was super helpful in being able to pull this together, showing compared to the 1940s imagery to the 2020 imagery, the difference in landmass. For the yellow line depicting what it was in 1940s, and then the 2020 as you see it here. That is no small amount. And when we think of 28 acres over time, you see little pieces here and there, but cumulatively, it really adds up. And it can be hard to visualize. Before the project landed with me upon joining Metroparks Toledo, a lot of things happened before I got here. Biological surveys to set the baseline of what were the river conditions like for species in the river. As I mentioned earlier, the section of the river doesn't meet the minimum standards by Ohio EPA for fish habitat, fish communities, and benthic communities. Several surveys happened in the river so that we could know what we're working with. These included assessments that were done by University of Toledo, Bowling Green State University, a feasibility study that studied different island complexes. So you may know of the Delaware Horseshoe is also getting work that's done. They had a recent groundbreaking for their project, I think a couple of weeks ago. But it was a part of a feasibility study by the Army Corps of Engineers that looked at how feasible is it to try to restore these different island complexes. This is explaining a little bit more about where they were doing the surveys, the types of surveys, trawling and electrofishing. The river island complexes provide a variety of different habitat types and increase habitat heterogeneity of the system, and have been shown to have a significant positive effect on both the density and diversity of benthic invertebrates and fish species. Y'all know the walleye a walleye festival, because that's what it seems like when I see everybody down there at the river up again. We want that to be able to continue to future generations for more folks that have those kind of experiences. This was an initial concept of doing work on the island, but as we've been in contact with the tribal nations, one of their concerns is that we're not disturbing the earth on this island, that we're not digging things up, because as you know, in 2014, there were bones that were discovered on the island. And so we want to respect the tribal nations in this matter and trying to do this project in a way that they are in agreement with how it's done. So they've been a part of our conversations and a part of the open comment periods. Shannon Hughes, our director of programming and volunteer services, visitor services, something. She's on our team. She's making sure that we're staying in contact, working as a liaison to stay in contact with the tribal nations, because she's built those relationships over several years. So we migrated away from that initial concept to this one that you see here, and don't strain too much to look at this. I'll be bringing up some concepts that make it easier to understand what it is that we're going to be building around the island. But to explain, there is going to be a temporary causeway for those who are online. Down here in the bottom left of the photo, there is a hashed line that's going from the White Street Park over to Audubon Islands. That is a temporary causeway where ODNR is like, you got to have signs letting people know what is happening. There will be temporary signs at different access points, as well as signs in the river, so that people are aware of what is happening. Around the island, we're proposing two different types of structures. One is called a rock barrier reef and the other is an engineered log jam. I'll show what those kind of look like in concept a little bit later, so don't worry about it too much. Trying to imagine what those look like. Because even for me, it was difficult because I got to see things for it to make sense sometimes. And then we're also doing work in the cove area. The cove being, you jump off screen, y'all right quick, look at the blue and oranges, yellow as it shows up. But this is the cove. And in the cove area, we're creating what's known as hummocks, creating deep water pools and hummocks, higher areas of higher elevation to give more heterogeneity in habitat. Because you know, not everybody likes it 3 feet deep. Some people like it 2 feet deep, or not people, but species. But it'll be different variations in grade in that cove area. The hashed light blue that you see throughout the island represents the temporary access routes that we need to have just to make it throughout the island. We've visited twice now to make sure that where we're going, do any trees need to come out? And working with Mark Haynes, they're absolutely phenomenal. Very minimal tree removal. We counted like 2 trees and that was it. And even then they're saying like, let's work together to see how we can avoid any kind of removals. There's an extensive amount of invasives on the island. And to that, I say, take them out. For the rock barrier reef, the work that we're looking to do is, these will be the rock barrier reefs being like the pebbled kind of look, will be varying in distances from the island. Not all of them will be the same distance. And in between that and the island, looking at doing some plantings, incorporating some tollwood to assist with the structure, provide additional habitat for any benthic communities or fish at different stages of life, and then utilizing along the island live staking. We won't be putting like large trees in there. We'll be utilizing live staking in a way that the native communities have let us know it's okay to use these dimbles to put into the earth, drop the live stake in and close it up, and that's it. And this is a kind of that conceptual visual that I was going to I'm working toward, helping you to see what I'm talking about with the tollwood that'll be incorporated into that rock barrier reef, how the plantings will be closer to the island, where the live stakes will be in the bank of the island. Sometimes it's difficult to see if you ever kayaked around the island, how there are like the erosion that's happening, but when you get up close, it's definitely there because it should not be a sheer rock face. There are examples around the island where it's that more gradual, where it goes gradually into the river. And that's what we want more of. Those engineered log jams, that one, when you see the concept, it'll make more sense. But those will be, just imagine a vertical log. It's about 12 to 18 inches DBH that are sticking up out of the water and are very close to the island. Those aren't something that's going to be far out to the river. It's going to be up closer to the island. And to give you a visual of that, this is how it will look along the live staking efforts that we'll have, and incorporating some gravel and cobble so that we can keep trees there. This picture shows an example of, this is going into the cove entrance, and you'll see that gradual kind of gradation coming from the island into the river. We want more of that in the cove area. Right now, there's just not much. It's just flat. With this being the entrance, we want to create more of a transition from bridge wetland habitats so that it can be a refuge, so that it can be a varying food source for ground birds and mammals. Upstream of Hunt Island, think back to the photo without me zipping back through all the photos. There's on the northern end upriver, there's a point where the water gets low enough, you can see the rock, the bottom, the river bottom. ODNR let us know this is good spawning habitat. So there was an area where we were planning to do work that we decided, hey, we're not gonna do this here. ODNR said it's good. There's nothing else that we need to do. So we were definitely listening to what folks are telling us, especially like when it's ODNR speaking, so that we can adjust what our plans are. These are just some more, this is the top picture is an example of an engineer logjam. It was very difficult finding photos online. Not the greatest quality, because people might call it, different organizations might call it different things, but this is an example of it. And then the Perrysburg Boat Club shared with us the type of debris that comes down river. And the power of the river is always absolutely amazing. But this is just an example of what some of the things that they experience from year to year. Again, those project benefits being stabilizing those eroding banks. We're not trying to solve for erosion. We're creating nature-based solutions to slow the amount of erosion that's occurring due to the cumulative impact of us as people on the river. Reducing that further erosion of the islands, creating resilient ecological systems that can withstand those different water flows and the ice flows that happen in the river. We're going through the analysis and early and design. We've already done the stakeholder outreach, as well as those public open houses. We were looking to start early 2024, like right now, beginning to do construction, but we're going through an extended permitting process because the permit we were hoping to go for, the Army Corps of Engineers said, nope, we needed to do a different type of permitting process. And that one takes a little bit longer. Right now, our timeline is really looking like July timeframe, but as you know, some birds are still nesting at that time. And so we're working with make sure with Jay and our team, when is the best time to start out here? And if even now there might be time to get out before everyone starts migrating back through to set up those temporary access routes beforehand. But we're
birds that might be nesting there in the cormorants. You may want to take some steps that discourage that.
yeah. Yeah, I haven't heard of the cormorants nesting there, but we're definitely still always monitoring and trying to get out to the island. The neighbors who live along River Road and the folks who live in Perrysburg definitely been like, hey, do you know what's up? So we do hear from folks, but definitely thank you for that. And that is it for the Audubon Islands. As you know, Zuri Carter, feel free to drop me an email. It can be related to this project, maybe not related. And Scott Carpenter, some of you may know him. Feel free to email him as well as it relates to this project. He's also on the project team. Are there any questions related to Audubon? Yes, sir.
I've heard that they're downstream, about a mile or something, near the Walbridge area, there's islands.
Yes, sir.
That are also going to be modified. Is that part of this project or was that another?
That is another project. So there are a set of islands further downstream known as the Delaware Horseshoe set of islands near Walbridge Park. And that is a project with the city of Toledo, I believe. And I should know that better as many times as I've heard it. But Verdantis is also working with them on that project. Verdantis, they're the engineering design team that we're working with for Metroparks for this project.
Is it being done for the same reason?
Yes, well, I'm trying to remember if there was just under the Mommy AOC because I'm not a part of that project because that's city of Toledo.
And there's a lot, when there's erosion, does that cause a lot of silt fill in the channel or is that part of the problem also?
To fill in
The river.
the river does get runoff. In this case, we're not trying to address the filtration issues that is experienced in the river. We're trying to create habitat for fish and benthic communities.
Those 28 acres that disappeared last summer.
Yeah.
It-
Down the river, yeah.
it-
Not till late.
Right now, the Lake Erie problem.
That's where we have our worst.
Yeah,
That's where we have our worst water too. And we have all the algae growing. And it affects our water quality
it does.
at the exit of the rivers into the lake.
Yeah, and at least in this case, we are trying to address the speed at which erosion happens. We can't stop it, but by trying to incorporate nature-based solutions, we can attempt to undo what we caused. Yes, sir.
Yeah, clear on the temporary causeway, that was a public or just for the construction?
For construction only.
Okay, is
Yeah.
it gonna be a permanent project for public or?
No, it will remain an island, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
The law is a bit for, bank stabilization.
So remind folks of the log jam. That is this right here. The bank stabilization will occur with hopefully like with the live stakes taking root, similar to like how you want species to be planted along a riverbank or a stream bank to decrease the amount of erosion that's happening. This is to stave off the forces of the river that contribute to the erosion that's happening. Yeah. Let me get the gentleman here in the back.
Follow up on that question.
Sorry.
Did I hear you say that on that stream on the inside of the island, that was gonna be built up with just dirt, soil? And that these two types were the only man-made deterrents to the erosion? Or did, because what would have to keep the erosion happening again?
For the cove area.
The purple orange area.
Yeah, for the cove area, we'll be creating deep water pools, so we'll be digging a little bit as well. And then taking the soil that's removed from the cove area and stacking it into areas to create hummocks. So areas of a little bit higher elevation.
And that
And then
deters, stops erosion or just slows it down?
we're not trying to stop erosion in the cove, we're creating additional habitat in the cove. The erosion we're trying to stop is occurring along the edge of the island,
Right.
the perimeter of the island.
With those two techniques that you showed,
Yes,
man-made.
yes. I thought I saw a hand.
Just if the farmers, if they were there in the 1920s, they were plowing those fields.
Yes.
And so that would have been a lot of damage, to the surface. And kept it flatter, I suppose. But I was wondering if they were digging into it in the 1920s, they would have possibly uncovered grave sites and so forth, and maybe no one even knows.
Yeah, and I can't speak to their practices. It's possible that they did encounter any burials, but unless it were reported. It's
My
lost.
brother's actually a fisherman found uncolored remains.
Okay.
It's on the south end of the part that's kind of like. You know what I mean? Like, now it's more eroded
Mhm.
to the left of the blue dot at the bottom.
Yeah,
And he sent me a picture of it and, yeah, I think I found some human remains. And then he sent me the picture of it and I was like, yeah, you did find some human remains. It was a skull and
One of the gentlemen
Um,
here says his brother found some of the human remains.
and they brought they brought people out and of course my brother has no idea about the age of things and they determined that it was native.
Mhm.
And they basically just dropped the skull back in the water and collected some of the jewelry that had been buried with it.
Okay.
And took that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so nobody came out and tried to loot it.
Yeah.
Obviously, but I think it's that predominantly the south end.
Frank, do you know if, wasn't it determined that it was not a burial site so much as
Natural.
the guy sort of just died out there? It's not a native burial site, like a burial mound or
I'm just
anything like
looking
that.
at
It's
athletes,
more like
whether or not
this
that
guy
the remains that were
just
found
happened to
were
be there.
part of a burial
So
site
there
or naturally
concerns
occurred.
about that.
That was the big, you remember
Yeah.
we had all the ice out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, big ice shelf basically came up and
Cleaned
sliced
the whole
off a big
thing off,
part of that
yeah,
island
yeah.
and exposed that.
Yeah,
where that
I
was.
remember when that happened.
Oh, okay. Oh, geez.
did you know about the huge ice? Ice?
I-
that came
Great
through?
pictures.
I have seen photos.
Oh,
Um,
I've got pictures going back.
Right.
I have
It was like
seen
13, 14
Okay, Scott Carpenter put a picture on Facebook, and I mean. he
A guy was
on the
standing
tree,
pretty
had
high.
been damaged,
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
way
you-
up, 6 feet, 8 feet tall.
I saw a photo from the 50s or something where someone was standing really high.
Denise online says that there were 2 native children determined by the coroner.
Ah,
Mm.
Okay, I knew it was something odd, it wasn't
Yes, Denise is not there.
really scary, right? Our days.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
When they put those vertical poles in,
Yes.
have they considered how being pulled up against the ice?
Yes, so how any of these structures will hold up against the ice, that was one of the conditions of even putting in a proposal that you only make suggestions for things that can try to hold up against the ice. Just remembering that these are nature-based solutions. We're not trying to 100% solve for what's occurring in the river. For that to happen, we have to change our activities on land so that things, the water flow that's occurring off the land isn't making it to the river the way that it does. And that's a bigger ask. And I apologize, I do need to switch over to Jay. He has some really awesome things.
Before you
Oh,
go,
go ahead.
there's some late questions.
Oh, yeah.
about The Secor, if you don't mind, and they
Oh.
asked that I actually.
Okay,
So Paul online said, great to see the pine warbler at Secor this winter.
yes.
According to Ohio Bird Breeding Bird Atlas, some nesting and oak openings too. He had a question, is any, let's see, no, I'm getting it. Secor, there are some wonderful areas with conifers. Can the expansion plans please include plantings under conifers for birds and animals that like to eat the seeds?
Mhm.
Can some new conifers please be planted at oak openings? So those are the 3.
yeah. Well, do you want to address that when we get to timber management? Okay. Was there, I think you mentioned there was another question, or was that the one?
That was it.
Oh, okay.
If someone wants to address those, it's okay, there's. Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely be able to answer that question here soon. But right now, coming up is Jay Wright, our Director of Conservation Science, to talk with y'all about some more amazing stuff we're doing here in Metroparks.
Did you see everybody cringe when we were conifer came up?
Do some dancing and weaving or some intro or something.
I don't think I'll do any dancing.
Introduce yourself.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So my name is Jay Wright. I am Director of Conservation Science. Only been here a few months longer than Zuri, so it's like super new. Also not from Ohio, I'm from Rhode Island. I been in Ohio since 2015, so I came for graduate school at Ohio State, Columbus. I did my graduate work. So my background is mostly bird research. So my graduate work was studying blue jays and their dispersal and caching of acorns and chestnuts. And I did actually present to TNA on that when I was still a grad student. So some of you may have seen me then. Am I supposed?
There you are.
Oh, okay, you just showing me kind of what it looks like there, and then.
I guess try to hit these little arrow guys.
Okay,
See if that works.
Yeah.
Hit the pad. Hit the pad.
oh, I see.
Okay, the thing.
So these aren't gonna. Oh, that works too.
Okay.
And then, okay. All right, so we got more to cover here. I hope you guys all good to stay for a little while longer. Okay. So I got maybe just to finish my introduction. Yeah, I've been here since May of 22, so almost 2 years. And my background's in mainly bird research, but other kind of wildlife ecology type research is kind of what I've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years or so. So I'm going to start by talking about our conifer management plan, our timber management plan, because it's expanded a little bit beyond conifers. And just kind of give some updates on that. And then after I finish that, I'll get to
the fun like research and monitoring updates and some of the new stuff that we're doing there. So conifers at oak openings. There were originally about 480 acres planted between the 1930s and the 1970s. Why were they planted? At the time, so there was, a lot of these areas of the oak openings had been farmed. There were just wide open spaces. There was a lot of blowing sand. So they needed some kind of stability to prevent soil erosion. And a lot of people were into conifers at that time. It was kind of like, yeah, let's build some habitat. Pines grow fast. We can harvest them at some point in the future. So we kind of plant these pine plantations. They'll provide some soil stabilization. They look nice. And yeah, everybody likes conifers at the time. We didn't really have a great understanding then of landscape ecology, of native habitats, and what we should really be trying to return the oak openings to. And part of it was, yeah, future revenue for the park at that time was sort of the long-term plan for these. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like the condition of the pine stands in the parks right now. So we've done some research, and I'll be going through a couple of papers here that have been published in recent years about our pine stands. One of the big kind of take-home messages is that some of these pine stands are in really poor condition, especially the red pine stands. So these figures are maybe a little confusing to understand at first, but if we look at the left two, the green boxes are showing the recommended range of what your basal area per acre and your stand density, so like number of trees per acre, should be in a healthy pine stand. And the gray bars are showing what our current pine stands are. So we're seeing that we have higher density of trees and a higher basal area per acre than what should be kind of typically called a healthy pine stand. And even more telling is the live crown ratio for especially the red pine stands. So normally you would want a minimum of 20% live crown ratio. So what that means is if you're looking at the full pine tree, the amount of tree that has a live crown, and like the absolute minimum should be 20%. Ideally, you'd want 30 to 60% of live crown. And most of the pines in our red pine stands are 10% or less. So they're really, and that's kind of a direct result of the density that they're at, and also kind of interacting with other diseases, especially like bark beetle damage. We did try to, a previous management practice for some of these pines to lengthen their life was called timber stand improvement, where we would go in and thin out the pines so they weren't at such high density, but it really had no effect. The pines were at they're already kind of too far gone to really respond to that treatment, so it didn't really help. The bark beetle damage, just for a little background, it's not an invasive insect, so they're a native insect, but when these trees are not healthy, they're not able to produce enough sap to expel out the beetle larvae. So that's why we're having some further kind of mortality of these trees from these bark beetle infestations. And one prime example is the Spot. So a lot of people know that stand on Girdham Road called the Spot. It's a really nice photogenic place. There's a bark beetle infestation in the kind of the northwest corner that it's slowly basically killing off the stand. And so we periodically are trying to control that. I got a little bit ahead of myself, I think, because I'm going to talk about that again. Right, so a lot of our conifer stands are in rapid decline. They're also reaching kind of the end of their life anyway, so a lot of them are collapsing in some cases, and they'll continue to collapse. And the problem with just allowing some of these pine stands to collapse is that it makes it very hard to go in there and do more management. So, if we allow a pine stand to collapse, there's a lot of down logs and everything. And so if we start to have a bunch of invasive, shrubs or something come in that area, it's really hard to get in there with any kind of machinery, or even, people like walking over all these dead pines to get in there and do actual land management to make it a better habitat. So that's kind of a problem that future management becomes sort of unfeasible if we allow most of these to just collapse on their own. And then the other problem is that most of these pine stands, or a lot of them, will kind of naturally succeed into dense maple forests because we're not getting really good oak regeneration. And that's part of a larger problem of oak regeneration across the eastern North America right now. There's a lot of kind of interacting factors that are causing that, especially lack of fire. But basically, maple forests, especially like these kind of dense maple forests, don't have nearly as much wildlife value as oak forests. And here in the oak openings, we kind of want to really have those open oak forests as the key sort of habitat we're going for. So the objectives with the conifer management plan, we're basically trying to salvage timber from dead and collapsing pine stands, and also some other stands that are not in as bad shape. But we really are trying to restore oak openings habitats. So, in most cases, this means restoring oak savannas, prairies, and sand barrens. One of the issues with especially the white pine stands, which are maybe not as unhealthy as red pine stands, is that they naturally regenerate in these sand barrens really well. So they're kind of overtaking some of these sand barrens that would be providing more native oak habitat for some of those rare species like antenna waving wasp and the tiger beetles. They're kind of taking those over because they grow really well in that kind of soil. And there are some stands that we want to leave. So we're trying to kind of maintain the life of a certain number of culturally significant, so whether it's for aesthetic purposes, areas near trail intersections that are providing shade for horses in the horse trail areas. So we are trying to leave some stands as well. I'll show you a map in just a second of what all this is. And then, yes, we hire a company to come in, but then they're selling those pines. And so we make some money off of it, but all of the proceeds from the sale go straight to restoring sites so that the opening is preserved. So this is the current update to our conifer or really timber management plan, because there are some hardwood areas that we're including in this. So looking at these colors, the greens are what we're calling the legacy stands. So ones that we are going to leave because they have like culturally significant value. We also do want to leave a certain amount of habitat for some of those pine specialist birds that have started to use the pine stands that, they were not here natively, but they've been here for quite a while now. And so we've had breeding pine warblers, we've had blue-headed vireo. So we have some pine specialists that are using these stands. And we want to try and maintain some of those, but for the most part, our main goal and main responsibility we feel in oak openings is to restore that oak openings kind of savanna habitat and prairie. So some of the green are the legacy stands that we're basically going to allow to stay and really try and maintain the health. So for instance, any of those pine bark beetle areas, especially in the spot, for instance, we're going to try and do sanitation cuts to limit that spread of that disease as long as possible. The blue are stands that we don't have any current management plans for, but at some point in the future, we would probably be trying to remove those, whether it's 10 years or beyond. They're ones that we would like to remove at some point. And then the red ones are the stands where we have current removal that's going on right now. And we'll go on probably to next year. I don't think they'll finish this year. So till next winter as well. And then I'll have and so just to look at the scale of this, the legacy stands, there's 130 acres of that. You probably can't read that. Mm-hmm. There's 130 acres of the green stands that would be remaining. There's 75 acres of the current removal project and about 212 acres of the blue color of stands that at some point in the future we would try to be removing.
Hey Jay, could you what's north-south? It's very hard to hear.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the north is top, and then we have here Monclova Road, Gurdon, Wilkins, and so we have the Larkspur Meadow, West Gurdon Meadows here. Mm-hmm. This is where the cattle are here. I have the next slide is more detailed maps of the project.
Pointing to this for you.
Okay.
Marianne's also there.
Yeah. All right. So these are more deep. Sorry, go ahead. Here.
Jay, you don't have a color for what's been removed in gas tubes.
No, I don't. No. So sorry. There have been obviously pine removals in the past. but no, I don't have a map with that pointed out right now. All right, so these are the two kind of main project areas that are going on right now. So just to orient you again, this is Monclova Road. For people on Zoom, I'm the left map first. So it's Monclova Road, and that's between Girdham and Wilkins on the north side of the road. And so it's the pine stand, and it's a mix of white pine and red pine in there. And it's directly adjacent to what we call the butterfly meadow. I'm not sure what everybody calls it. Just for some reference of like some of the plants that are in the area, all the red dots on these maps are our rare plant population records. So where our plant monitors do some of their rare plant monitoring. And so, you know, these were both sort of our highest priority areas to do pine stand removals because they were directly adjacent to areas that had a lot of these rare plants and that also had existing habitat that we could grow. So basically make the size of that prairie. So the butterfly meadow is, you know, a kind of pretty decent prairie there. So we're going to expand the size of that and hopefully get some more. Your battery's running low.
The yellow is where the went, the pine can be taken out.
Yes.
So this is the scout trail here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yep.
here's the scout trail where it crosses Monclova Road.
Okay.
And then and here's Wilkins.
Yep. And then the other map on the left is the main part of that is what we've called, so that's along Jeffers Road.
It's Jeffers.
Badger Barrens is what we sometimes call it. That's where the last badger burrow, I guess, that we know of was in the 90s. And it also includes the section that's right next to the South Parkway Meadow, which is where the cows have been the last 2 summers. So that will really kind of open up that. So those three globs on the right there.
Well, this is Mallard Lake to give
Yeah.
you. So here's
So-
the parkway, comes up here.
Yeah, so those 3 globs will kind of like help
This is
connect
Sparrow Meadow here.
that lark
Here's
sparrow
the-
meadow with the other smaller prairie areas that are on the other side of the road.
Is that
Yeah.
Girdham right there in the
This
middle
is
of all
Girdham.
that red?
Oh,
Yeah.
Girdham goes
Oh,
up.
that's my favorite spot.
Well, I'm glad these are gone, because that was a nasty corner there, so.
Yeah, so
But
a lot of,
a sign saying the road was closed for 2 days would have been nice to those of us who were.
it wasn't supposed to be, that's the whole thing.
Yeah. Boy, were we surprised. Boy, were we surprised.
Yeah, that wasn't us, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Fun, Township.
So yeah, this is like epicenter of, you know, lark sparrows, rare plants, good sand barrens. So that's like the kind of core area of some of the best oak openings habitat that we have. So yeah, those are the 2 project areas that will be wrapped up by next winter, or by, you know, the end of next winter. They've already finished this, the removal of this, probably all this. They've finished those areas,
It's done.
and I
This is-
think they're moving
they
into
were
Badger
here
Barren.
today. They were
Yeah.
working on this in the last few days. This is where one of the classic example of collapsing forests is right there still on the scout trail. So that's also, by the way, the highest point in Lucas County. So,
Oh, is it really? Or are you just
Marion.
making this?
We used to
Just
say,
saying
we used to
thing.
say Wolfingham Cemetery was,
Mhm.
but I'm going with, and I'll take you out and show you why I say that.
Well, now I'm gonna go back and
I'll
ask
show
our
you where.
GIS guy.
Come over and ask me, I'll show you. I'll show you where.
So I think that's about all. All right, so the other thing, just to point out the colors in this, because there are a couple things going on here. The colors are sort of like the planned habitat sort of restoration. So the yellow is basically for upland prairie and in some areas savanna or sand barrens. The green is just allowing native hardwood regeneration. So those would become forest again. Mainly allowing, I don't think we would really do any planting in there, at least not if it's necessary, just allowing the natural regeneration. And one other note, so this area here is actually one of the hardwood areas that's getting removed. This is not a conifer area, that one central glob in the middle of the butterfly meadow. That's just a dense maple stand. So it's just like nothing in there, but really dense maples. And some of those were planted that way as well.
Is that gonna be a clear cutting?
Yep, yeah, it's all just basically clear cutting of the species that we are removing. So in that area, it's all the maples, which is pretty much all that's in there. And in the pine stands, it's pretty much all the pines, but they're leaving any of the other trees that are mixed in there. It doesn't want to move anymore. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, so I just want to go through quickly some of the research that we've done just to kind of illustrate some of the benefits of these pine removal projects. So this is a study that, you may know, and probably maybe he's done a presentation for TNA. Scott Abella is a researcher at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who's been working with us for probably close to 20 years, and really great at getting a lot of this research out and published. This particular paper is in biological conservation, and this was looking at 14 years after a pine removal that was done in 2002. So I'm going to show just a couple of graphs from this, just to give you an idea. So one of the things I mentioned before that's a big problem just all over the East is oak regeneration. And if we look at this figure here, it's showing the number of oak trees per hectare that were in these study plots. And we have the experimental plots, which are the ones that were in the pine stands. So that's the ones that are labeled cut in black. And the control plots are plots that were in other pine stands that were not cut. So basically comparing cut stands to uncut stands and just kind of looking at the response. Many of you probably know that within these dense pine stands, a lot of times there's not too much in the understory, so these won't be like earth-shattering results, but it still kind of illustrates what can happen to these lands afterwards. So, you know, after 14 years, so in 2015, after the removal in 2002, the cut stands had, of course, you know, quite a few oak regeneration or oak sprouts and saplings coming up. And then looking at nectaring plants, so plants for butterflies and other pollinators. On the left graph or left part of the graph, we have these three figures that are all the cut stands, and then the right are all the control stands. So these are, again, in pine stands that were not cut. So really what you see is in the black, so that's 14 years after the removal, quite a lot of nectarine sources and other important pollinator plants coming up, regenerating really well from the seed bank. You know, most of this coming up from the seed bank without any kind of restoration seeding or anything. And then I'm just going to run through a few kind of example plots. So this is a more recent study. So this is a removal in 2019 or late 2018. And then we're looking at photos of the same plot before removal and then in the 3 years after removal. So this is all the exact same orientation of the photo. So that's kind of like illustrates that you can kind of see some of the changes and some of the saplings that grow up and what it looks like. And then with the actual like plant diversity in the plots, we're going from 36 species in this one before the removal to 103 species in only 3 or 4 years later. That's 5% of Ohio's entire flora, vascular flora. Here's another one, went from 10 species to 61 species, again, in that just 4-year time frame. So that's a 6-fold increase in plant species. This one went up to 66 species. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of diversity in these pine stands, so 5 species was all that was found. And these plots are, I believe these would be the 20 meter by 25 meter plots, so they're kind of large plots. And then some of the species, you know, the seed bank really is rich with a lot of, you know, rare and state listed species. So raceme milkwort, prickly pear, and then this Drummond's dwarf bulrush was, I think, presumed extirpated from the state or last seen or in the region. I'm not sure of the state in like the 1920s or some long time ago, and then it came up in a removed pine stand. So the habitats will kind of respond to this pretty well. Yeah, and then just to kind of like bring it, if you don't care that much about the plants or something, that plant diversity and that increase in structure does mean a lot more resources for pollinators and other insects, and that of course translates to more resources for birds. And hopefully we're in some of these places, especially like the butterfly meadow, we might start to get big enough patches for some of the really kind of area specialist birds like grasshopper sparrows. Really, hopefully lark sparrows. In some cases, lark sparrows have moved in and nested in previous pine removal areas. So for the most part, we're seeing really, really great results from these pine removals. Maybe I'll stop there and see if there are questions on this part of it. Yep.
So on those regeneration slides, that was no seeding being done, right? Which was natural.
Correct. Yeah. We haven't really in general done too much seeding in the pine removal areas. We usually, at least we wait for a while and wait for several years and see what comes up from the seed bank. I know that we haven't done any seeding for the recent ones that have happened in the last few years. Yeah.
I was looking at a map of Ohio, and of all the counties, and I'm not sure exactly what I plugged in there, Lucas County has the most diverse, pretty much everything, in comparison to some of the other plant and animal life. Am I right about this?
You're certainly right about the plant life.
Okay,
Yeah, we have the most species of any, I believe, of any county in Ohio, the highest number of species of plants.
It's like 150 or something.
Oh, it's
It's
like
huge.
it's like
I mean,
900 or something.
Comparison.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I knew it was a large number.
Yeah, and potentially in some other taxa groups, we're quite high. Salamanders not as high as the Appalachian region, but they're I think we do pretty good in birds too. So. Yeah.
Is this, so in a forest like that, now putting it out, is that a high concentration of red squirrel?
There'd be some in there. I don't know.
Like that thing.
Yeah, I'll see red squirrels in other areas as well. So my guess is that they would be fine moving out, but I don't really know like how high a density they are in there. And I do have, so something I'll show in a little bit is, and I pointed out on the walk, that like drift fence to capture, it's like a camera trap for small mammals and reptiles. And I had one of those in a pine stand before the removal near the butterfly meadow. I had squirrels. I didn't have red squirrels in there though. I had chipmunks and couple fox squirrels, but yeah, I'm sure there probably are some red squirrels as well. All right, so I'll move on to the monitoring updates and some of the kind of new research that we're doing. There's a lot of, I'll try and run through these pretty fast. I'm just going to kind of quickly touch on some highlights, I guess. So, and then, yeah, I mean, within the audience, I think we probably have a lot of the monitors represented here. So like we have our rare plant monitoring program has been going on since I think the late 80s, or at least it started then with Denise Gehring and with staff, and then the volunteers have been doing it for a long time now. I know several of you guys are out here. So this year we monitored 218 populations of 42 species as part of that monitoring program. And some of the new kind of rare plant finds, new population finds, Canada plum, that was a really big one. Warty spike rush, I don't know that much about that one, but it sounds cool. Leafy blue flag iris, I think a new population of that, a new population of Baxter's violet. So we had some really great rare plant finds, and many of you know Karen Menard, who kind of helps coordinate that, and she's always going out. She has it. I need to find at least 2 new rare plant populations a year, and she is usually succeeding on that, or always succeeding on that. All right, so we also have a district-wide vegetation monitoring program. These are plots that, there's 160 plots total. Those are the 20 meter by 25 meter plots. So it's a big task to sample all of those, and that's something we do once every 3 years. And this coming year, or this summer 2024, is a sampling year. So I don't have any updates from that, except that we're going to be doing that this summer.
You said district-wide, is that all the Metroparks?
Yes.
Or is that just Oak?
Yeah, that's all the Metroparks. Yeah. There are quite a few in the oak openings because that's where a lot of the historic plots were as well. But yeah, we have them all over the Metroparks. Butterflies, we have 4 transects that are established. Are any of you in here a butterfly monitor? Was, okay. And we used to have, there've been a couple that have dropped over the years. We had 4 to 6 transects, but usually we get about over 40 species a year of butterflies on these. The dragonflies, so I know that Rick was there, I was talking to him a little earlier. And so that is a monitoring project at Wiregrass Lake that's been going since 2019. Was that the first year? Yeah, and that's just been really cool. I mean, they've been finding so many amazing finds, 35 species this year, I believe, of butterflies just at Wiregrass, of dragonflies just at Wiregrass Lake. Some of the new species that you guys got: southern spreadwing, Vesper bluet, spot-winged glider, and I guess it's just a hybrid gilded and Royal River cruiser that you guys have. That's awesome. So yeah, if you want to know more about that, talk to Rick. That's really cool stuff. So we have bat transects that we've been doing for a while in sort of partnership with BGSU. We also this past summer started a driving transect that we're doing with the Ohio Division of Wildlife that kind of follows the North American bat monitoring protocol. So that will kind of contribute to a nationwide data set of bat monitoring. And we'll be doing that every year now. We have, of course, all of our bluebird and other cavity or nest boxes out there that we monitor with. Are there nest box monitors here? There probably are a few, Rick and.
The birds nest in actual cavity trees at my house, so.
Well, that's nice. Yeah. If you have that, then that's even better.
Yeah.
So this year it was 619 chicks of mainly bluebirds, tree swallows, and house wrens. And our lark sparrow breeding and monitoring, and so that's mostly Val Horniak, who's done a lot of that work over the last 20 years. This year she monitored 14 pairs, produced at least 9 young. We also did a project this year to try and get a little bit more information on nest predation and what might be their kind of main nest predators, because it's maybe been assumed it was things like raccoons, but we didn't really have actual data on that. So so we got out 8 cameras on nests, or cameras on 8 nests, and 3 of those were predated that we got on camera. So they're all 3 different things: 1 skunk, 1 red-tailed hawk, and 1 red fox. So yeah, interesting stuff, but kind of cool that it's not a bunch of raccoons. And then another just kind of note about the lark sparrows, we obviously kind of really keep an eye on our lark sparrow population, and we try and do a lot of management pretty much specifically for lark sparrows. It also benefits some other species, but I don't know, have you heard about these scrapes that we've done, where we kind of like go in to some of the lark sparrow nesting areas and sort of with like a bulldozer or skid steer kind of scrape the top of the soil to sort of open it up to more of like a sand barren again. And because lark sparrows like to have bare ground to walk around in and forage, and those have really been successful. So I mean, lark sparrows have been nesting in or on the edges of these scrapes ever since we started doing them. And the vegetation has really responded how we wanted it to. So the first year it's pretty barren still, but then it grows up in these clumps that are perfect for lark sparrow nest habitat. So that's been really successful. And then of course, all the prescribed burning that Lorraine does really helps with that. So the raptor monitoring project that Steve Lauer heads up, that was going strong again this year. They found 56 active nests of, I think it's like 8 or 9 raptor species, so owls and hawks. We have our long-running frog calling survey in the oak openings that's been going for over 30 years now, and I don't really have anything to say about that, except it's like one of the longest data sets on the amphibians in the country, I think. And then we also continue to do with our interns, rare insect monitoring of tiger beetles, antenna waving wasps, and other fun insects. Okay, so that's kind of like, those are all of the or most of the sort of species level kind of monitoring that we do. Most of that, except for the district-wide plots, are in just kind of specific areas. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about trying to expand to have more district-wide monitoring. So my background is in bird research, so I kind of first thing I wanted to start with was more bird monitoring. The kind of goal with having a more district-wide monitoring was just to track any of these changes in species use across the parks, especially how it relates to our habitat management. So looking at presence and abundance of species in all different kinds of habitats, and then before and after management that we do, monitoring the population status of any of these conservation concerned species. I'd also like to contribute to regional and national databases, so that's why I'm kind of using eBird for some of this. And then ultimately, we may use like indicator species for certain habitats to really track like how our management's doing. So I kind of started 2 new monitoring programs, and the first is this non-breeding bird program. So just a quick note, I mean, most wildlife research is kind of weighted heavily towards the breeding season and things that happen for producing young. And then a lot of times the like non-breeding or wintering, whatever, it's kind of like, oh yeah, they do whatever, they hibernate or they fly south or, you know, stuff happens to them. But, you know, there's been more awareness in the last 10, 20 years that we need to have this like full annual cycle monitoring of what is happening to really conserve these species. So this is a monitoring program that really covers almost the whole year, from August to May. And the volunteers, and I know there's a few of you out here, going out once a week or once every couple of weeks and doing this 1 kilometer, 30-minute transect, and just getting a ton of data. So we've already, in the first year, so we just started last year around this time, about 26, 25 volunteers and staff. We've done over 900 surveys at 18 parks. We've gotten up to over 200 species recorded on these. So, you know, the data is pouring in. This is all through eBird, if you're familiar with that. It's a huge citizen science data set. It's widely used. So, you know, it's not only contributing to our knowledge of what we have here in the parks and in our management, but it's also contributing to a nationwide data set. So there's scientists all over the world that can use this. You know, a couple focal species for the non-breeding season are rusty blackbirds, and during the migration and like early wintering period, American tree sparrows during the wintering period. These are ones that are kind of called out as species of concern in some regional conservation plans. We also have a breeding bird monitoring that we just started this past year. This is a different kind of survey where we just have points. It's point-based counting, about 150 survey locations, again, across all the parks and all the habitats are represented. The goal is to reach each of these 2 to 3 times a season. I didn't really reach that goal this past season, but I will say for both the last program and for this one, still open to volunteers, especially for the breeding bird, for the breeding bird monitoring, like skilled birder volunteers I could use for this, especially if you want to kind of go to some sites off trail that you don't usually get to see. Yeah, the goal for both of these really to inform the adaptive management, and especially related to our conservation concerned species. So a lot of grassland birds and wetland birds are kind of represented in those conservation concern. All right, so moving on to this reptile and small mammal monitoring that we started. So this is a kind of partnership with researchers at Ohio State and OPARK. So OPARK stands for the Ohio Partners in Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. And they had all these cameras they used for a previous study. They had nothing to do with them. And so they started partnering and finding people across the state that could use these cameras. So we took 20 of them and put up 10 arrays that look like this. So it's called it's a kind of adapted drift fence. And what all it really does is, as things are small animals like snakes, frogs or toads and mice are moving across the prairie, most of these we kind of put out in prairie type open areas. They hit this fence, or they hit this like metal flashing fence, a solid barrier. They have to go one way or the other if they want to get to the other side of it. So they're funneled into these buckets, and then as they pass through that bucket, they just go through it and out the back. There's a camera on the inside of the bucket that's looking down, and it takes photos of of the animals that are passing through there.
Oh, tricky, tricky.
Yeah, so yeah, it was like we collect 2 pennies. So, and we put all of these in areas where we've done recent restoration or where we want to see like how management kind of impacts the wildlife use, like before and after management. So I have 2 of them out at Secor. So that one I pointed to when we were out earlier, that's one of the 2 that I have at the Secor site. And a couple of priority species are blue racers and eastern hognose snakes, so kind of our specialist oak opening species here. But this is kind of what it looks like. So this is the photos that we get. So we have here eastern hognose snake on the left, blue racer below it. That mouse is a meadow. You can't really see it very well. But at nighttime, that's a meadow jumping mouse. We get a lot of mice, not a lot of meadow jumping mice. We get a lot of white-tailed mouse moving in and out of these things. Meadow jumping mouse, we get a fair number of those as well. Underneath that, that's a ribbon snake, and that's over in the wet prairies near Irwin, across the street. Leopard frog also in that area, and then a eastern milk snake. So yeah, it's just really cool. It's a very exciting project to just kind of like get these cameras and start scrolling through photos and seeing all these really cool animals. So again, this just started this past year, so we'll be gathering more data from these in the coming years. All right, now I'll have a little bit about grazing. How are we doing on time? Everybody still good?
Oh, we're so way past, not even to worry.
Okay.
People just forget not to leave, but don't worry.
All right, so cattle grazing, just to provide a little background, I guess, on why we might want to have cows on Metroparks, in case you haven't heard too much about it yet. So, you know, we used to, basically these prairies and savannas are reliant on a dynamic disturbance to remain as prairies. Otherwise, they naturally succeed into, you know, forests or shrublands and that kind of thing. And some of the historic disturbances that were really common that maintained this were grazing by bison and elk, and, you know, pretty frequent fire, most of it by the Native Americans, but also, you know, natural fires. So grazing is one of these things that was a previous disturbance on these ecosystems that kind of kept them in that state that we no longer have. Cows are selective grazers like bison. They have similar diet preferences. They're not identical, but they have similar diet preferences to bison. And, you know, if used in the right way, along with some other tools, they can kind of mimic the natural grazing disturbance that might have happened if we had these wild, roaming free populations of bison. So that's kind of the idea behind trying to introduce grazing as a management strategy in some of our prairies. The main objectives for it in terms of like the actual habitat, we wanted to increase the structural heterogeneity. So that's in the plants, like a mix of different kinds of plants, different heights and structures of plants, a greater diversity of plants as well. We wanted to reduce invasive or especially aggressive species, and not always like non-native. So like some goldenrod, for instance, Canada goldenrod, you know, aggressive species that can, or we want to allow a more variety of forbs to exist in there. Big blue stem is another one that can really take over, but we would like to allow more forbs in there. And then really in particular for lark sparrows and these grassland birds, create some bare patches. So we want to have it look a little bit more like some of the natural sand barrens. So in that West Girton meadow, we have quite a few bare patches where the lark sparrows like to use, and where we want to introduce the grazing, we want to kind of return some of that so it's not so dense with just grass. So yeah, improving ground nesting bird and pollinator habitat is the key goal for all this. So what we've done is we're basically sort of cautiously doing this grazing trial and slowly expanding it as long as it's looking good. So in 2022, we started with about 10 acres in that South Parkway meadow, just at the Gurdam and Reed intersection. And this past summer, we added the part of the area right across the street. It was about 18 acres. And we also encompassed some of the savanna. So we put the fencing further into the savanna area to try and bring some of that disturbance there, where there's a lot of bracken fern that was kind of taking over the area. So hoping to kind of set back that bracken fern. And then in 2024, we plan to expand to the Monclova 295 meadow, which is, one of our corridor properties, but it's very close to the oak openings. And really same goals for there. In some areas, it's pretty dense with big blue stems. So we want to kind of set back some of that grass and allow some more structural diversity. Monitoring. So we're working with the Black Swamp Bird Observatory. So they're doing regular weekly bird monitoring during the breeding season of control sites and of the grazed sites. And then we're doing vegetation survey transects throughout all the grazing areas. For the new pasture at Monclova 295, since we've had a little bit more time to prepare, we have an existing butterfly transect there. So we'll have a lot of pre-grazing data on butterflies. We'll have pre-grazing data for birds. I also put one of these drift fence there, so I'll have pre-grazing data on reptiles and small mammals. So it'll be really interesting to see how that particular meadow responds to grazing because we have a lot more data ahead of time. Don't really have too many results yet. It's pretty early on to see how things are going to respond to it. So far, the bird use has been kind of what you expect, just early successional generalist species like house wrens, indigo buntings, field sparrows are everywhere, bluebirds and common yellow throats. So nothing too interesting there. The lark sparrows from across the street have started to use the grazed areas maybe a bit more, but they haven't nested in them yet. Looking at the vegetation, we are seeing, so for the year following grazing, we're seeing a greater variation in the height. So we're kind of starting to get to that structural heterogeneity that we're looking for there. And also a reduction in the litter depth. So, that buildup of like thatch or something, the cows are kind of disturbing that and pushing it into the soil or eating it. So we're getting less litter depth, so that'll help with opening up some more bare spots. So just kind of looking at a really sort of coarse summary over just 1 year, which, this could very well change. By no means like a rigorous data set yet, but we did see at that South Parkway meadow from last year to this year, we saw a 20% drop in grass cover. We saw a 3% drop in woody, so not huge progress there, but cows don't really like to eat woody stuff. So goldenrod, actually quite a bit of drop in goldenrod and a small drop in fern cover there. And then we did get a little bit of an increase in some of the stuff we wanted. So a small, 2% increase in bare ground and 8% increase in other forb cover. So like not counting goldenrod or ferns. Yeah.
How many cattle were being used at this point?
So in the first year at that 10-acre meadow, it was about 4 to 6. It depended a little bit, and I think one was born there that year. And then this year he had about 16 or so with the expanded area. And then just to, I don't know if you saw, but so this cow is a really friendly cow that would just come up to you if you got inside the pasture. Most of the cows would standoffish or whatever. She would come right up to you, get head scratches. We were trying to do our veg plot. She came right over, started eating out of our veg plot. And she was also in this and that. She's scratching her head on my veg stick, my measuring stick. So yeah, it's kind of cute to get out there and work with.
You need to drag that ugly structure out of the new, drag that ugly shade thing out of it.
Yeah, I think he has it on there.
Ask Jerry about how that area looked and what we did for years and years to make it not look like that. If it's.
Those were private residences and there's a lot of stuff that got done.
Oh yeah.
A little bit of it still popped up.
Yeah.
And now to see one that we put there is like, oh my gosh, can you put me this?
Okay.
Even though we don't have to look at
Yeah.
it today.
Yeah, I'll see if the producer, so that's their like little shade structure.
And when we get the snow, it really took a beating. It looks like a piece of shit.
Yeah. All right, so I'll move on to the last thing I think that I'm covering. And I kind of hinted that I would talk a little bit about this on the walk. So this is kind of leading up to talking about the Lights Out Toledo program. but just kind of looking at some of the two biggest threats that we have facing birds that are like human caused threats that doesn't count habitat loss are cats and building collisions. So cats are killing between 2 and 3 billion birds a year just in North America. And so this is outdoor cats. So, you know, cats are great in the house and everything. But as we saw out here in the parking lot today, we have feral cats that just live out here and they kill a lot of birds. So we're going to be cautiously trying to approach this cat issue and see what can be done about it, because it is a big problem that needs to be dealt with on a national scale, but we need to start somewhere. So we are in the early stages of working with the Black Swan Bird Observatory and American Bird Conservancy to start a Cats Indoors campaign in Ohio. And then I'm just going to talk a bit about building collisions. So for a little background, most migratory birds, or especially migratory passerines or songbirds, they migrate at night. So artificial lights and sky glow from cities, for some reason, we still don't understand why, a lot of birds are drawn toward those areas. And so they're kind of drawn away from their natural migration pattern, and they're drawn into areas that don't have a lot of habitat. They get confused and disoriented around really bright lights. So they might kind of like circle around bright lights for a while and collapse from exhaustion. Or often what happens is that in the morning, they're kind of exhausted, and then they start flying into the windows of the buildings that have all the glass. So everybody probably heard about the mass death in Chicago this past year, so I don't really need this example but in 2017, 400 birds. So this was a slide I made before this Chicago thing, but caught in one night, killed in Texas. So this happens at a large scale in cities all across the world. And so basically there are a number of what are called Lights Out programs in cities that the whole goal is basically to try and get cities to be darker, get buildings to turn off their lights. Here in Ohio, it's part of the Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative. They have the Ohio Lights Out program. So there are Lights Out programs in pretty much all the major cities in Ohio. And the one in Toledo here, BSBO kind of kicked it off in 2018. They got the biggest buildings in downtown Toledo signed up as part of it. When you sign up for the Lights Out program as like a building or a company, you agree to these like conditions. So you're turning off exterior decorative lighting, dimming the lobby and atrium lighting, turning off interior lights, drawing blinds. And you're doing all this between midnight and dawn. So it's not even all night long. It's just, between midnight and dawn, because that's when most birds are going to be coming in and deciding where to land. So we're really trying to work with the buildings to be, all right, you can have your nice pretty lights on in the evening when people are out at dinner and everything. But if you can turn them off at midnight and get the city a lot darker, that's when the migrants will be kind of coming through and deciding where to land. And we don't want them to land here. So we do this during the fall and the spring, during the migratory periods. And basically, so 2018, the first few buildings got signed up, but there's a lot more that can be done. So Metroparks became involved last year. So we partnered with BSBO, with Toledo Zoo, Audubon National Wildlife Refuge, and Nature's Nursery. So we're all kind of working together to try and make more progress on this, get more buildings signed up. They've started collision monitoring. So the zoo and the refuge started a collision monitoring program. Metroparks will be joining that effort this spring. And so that's basically daily, every single day. And there's a couple of monitors here with us that do this, going around downtown Toledo, walking the perimeter of buildings and collecting dead or dying birds that have collided with the glass. So really, turning off the lights is one big step. The next big step is getting the window treatments to try and make the glass safer. And that's the thing that's hard, because that's a big expense for buildings to buy, thousands of square feet of dots to put on windows. But ultimately, that's kind of what needs to be done to address the problem. Metroparks, I mentioned on the walk, we are in the process of getting funding together to start putting bird dots on all of our windows and wildlife. The Secor one here has some already. It's going to be getting more. They're not quite at their close enough density to be completely foolproof. But hopefully we'll start to be seeing more of that on Metroparks buildings as well.